Hi everyone, great to have you back with us. In episode one of our discussion around key GCC trends that are transforming the telecom and networking landscape, we talked about the transformation drivers and key tech focus areas in terms of adoption of mainstream and emerging technologies. Continuing our conversation today with Mohammad Faraz, Aswin, Lakshmanan, and Raghunath Kulkarni, we will delve into some key themes that are shaping the GCC landscape, such as location diversification, talent, and building a sustainable and inclusive culture. Welcome again, gentlemen. So I'll jump straight into the questions now. My first question in this episode revolves around location diversification. So, notably, as we talked about in the first episode, also, Faraz mentioned that Bangalore is sort of the key hub and it continues to remain so. But cities like Hyderabad and other cities, even tier two, tier three cities are, quickly catching up. So, notably, we've seen, especially in the last year or so, that there has been increased traction in terms of GCC setting up new centers for the first time in India or expanding footprint in tier 2 and tier 3 cities. So, firstly, it would be great if you could help us identify if this is a trend that you are also witnessing, particularly in the telecom and networking space for GCC. And if yes, what in your view could be some of the key factors underpinning this trend and enabling GCCs at a broader level as well as at a vertical level to look beyond tier one cities and sort of set up base in tier two and tier three cities as well? So, Raghu, if I could request your thoughts on that question to start with, please.
Sure. So there are two aspects around it. One is what happened when there was COVID. Everybody started getting comfortable with hybrid work. People started going back to their hometown, which meant now the access to the talented engineers or talented people was no longer restricted to one location only. And suddenly location preference started being that important criteria for an employee out of an employer. So now the availability of skilled people is distributed across, which means there is also a factor for companies to reach out into tier 2 and tier 3 cities so that they can tap into this potential. The other aspect of this was the increased availability of a lot of educational resources, technical courses being made available online. So it does not really require a Raghu or Ashwin to be in this technical hotspots to get access to this knowledge. Now, everybody has access to this knowledge, no matter where their location is, which means you can get an engineer, for example, who is skilled to the same extent as in Bangalore as in any other tier 2 or tier 3 city. So this is the technology aspect. And what we tend to forget when we are talking about technology is the domain expertise. By domain expertise, I do not mean the level of knowledge we have in the technology, but the knowledge that is inherently available within the domain of the problem that is supposed to be solved. And domain expertise, believe it or not, is something which is inherently available when you see the problems firsthand. So if you are solving some of these challenging or so to say scale problems, which are very much inherent and visible to a tier 2, tier 3 cities, that domain expertise is bound to be available there. And it helps businesses to have that domain expertise at their disposal, because then your effectiveness of the solution that we are building is higher as compared to we building a solution in a room sitting in, for example, say Bangalore, for a solution that will be deployed in a rural area. We might not capture the essence of what is the problem that is being solved. I'll just give one example here, which I recently came across, was the amount of digitization that happened in post offices as compared to what happens in banks, right? The transformation that happened in post offices is designed in such a way that it addresses the challenges of tier 2, tier 3, and even rural areas where post offices are predominantly the place people would go when they have to carry out financial transaction or deposit their money, etc. Now, the domain expertise is available only there. That is where, especially with networking and telecom industries, because these industries are scale industries.
Right.
The biggest service provider in the world becomes the biggest service provider because there are more than a billion people who are using those connections from that service provider. So
Right.
getting closer to the root of the
Right.
problem we are trying to solve is very crucial to the success of these companies. And that is where tier 2, tier 3 cities are now suddenly becoming more attractive uh,
Right.
in these aspects because you have the talent, you have the accessibility, you have built a very strong technology environment where the experience is same, and then
Right.
the domain expertise which is available very easily, and that is crucial,
Right.
and that is driving companies now to tap into that potential too.
Great. No, great thoughts, Raghu, and nicely elucidated with the post office example as well. I think, yeah, domain expertise certainly, that's one of the factors that would be driving GCCs to set up shop in tier 2 and tier 3 cities. So I would now move on to Aswin. Aswin, your inputs on the same question, please.
Yeah, I'll just maybe continue the thought process that Raghu just called out, right? He spoke about
Right.
talent availability, he spoke about domain expertise, and also catering to the local needs. You always need
Right.
people who are closer to the needs for them to maybe provide you the right kind of insights. And that's
Right.
what we call as diversity of thoughts, right? So those are the points that he covered. And let me take a different view in terms of, let's say I'm a GCC, I'm trying to set up something out here, right? So there are two kind of scenarios that you look out for. One is where there is an organization somewhere outside of India trying to set up a GCC, or two where you already have an established presence in some locations here, and then you're trying to
Yeah.
expand, right?
Right.
So there is a very thin balance that is being established out here. So if you're a new GCC, you start looking at what is the advantage that I get out of the location that I'm going to offer, that I'm going to get to. And then they start looking at various parameters in terms of how good is the city that I'm going to get through, what is the kind of talent availability. And then they start looking at the infrastructure index. They make a huge determination in terms of various parameters. And then they zero in on which could be the right location for them to choose for. And
Right.
invariably, for a new GCC, they could be, because you need a lot of sponsorship first for you to set up
Yeah.
something outside.
Yeah.
They would look at a more safer option in terms of getting into a kind of a tier 1 city which is more established.
Right.
But when you're looking at growth, that is when you have GCCs which have already established their centers, and then they are trying to grow more centers. I
Right.
think you see a trend where they are showing a lot of interest towards tier 2 and tier 3 cities as well, for most of the reasons which actually even Raghu covered. But there's also a balance. That's what I was trying to explain is, if you already have multi-centers,
Right.
one of the reasons that you also look at India as a center a lot of times is the kind of power of collaboration that you can bring in with
Right.
people all co-located in a couple of facilities and trying to drive solutions together, right? So that's where you should also think about what is going to be the limit of the number of centers or cities that you like to operate. And that's where
Yeah.
they make a balance in terms of maybe 2 3, and then they take the call on which could be the right kind of centers for us to invest on.
Right.
I'm definitely not covering the other aspects because Raghu did cover that extensively in terms of talent availability and all of these aspects. But that's my
Right.
take on location diversification.
No, great inputs. Thanks, Aswin. Okay.
Prerna,
So
if I could just add a
yeah,
perspective on the location diversity, right?
yeah, Prerna. Please go
So,
ahead.
like I already mentioned, there are about 50 new centers being established, and about
Right.
30% of them have moved into tier 2 cities. It's just in
Right.
2022, right?
Right.
Which means there's significant focus on tier 2 cities. And why are organizations going there? I think the simple answers, right? Just in
Mm.
terms of tapping into the larger talent pool, we have cost
Right.
arbitrage of say 20 to 30%. There's also importantly, de-risking portfolio concentration, right? You just don't want
Right.
to depend on one or two large centers. You also want to, remove that risk to a certain extent.
Right.
Collaboration with the startup ecosystem. If you really look at it, a lot of the startup hubs, although that come into limelight, are in tier 1 cities, but a lot of tier 2 cities have these accelerator programs, government-led programs that have extremely strong technology startups, right? And
Right.
also, what also happens invariably, there are global acquisitions that are done where smaller centers are present across various locations
Mhm.
in India, and as a result of that, that also get to your part. But where I'm getting to is increasingly we believe that India centers will have what we call as a hub and spoke model, right? Where there will be certain hubs across the country, and they will emerge these spokes in perhaps some of the smaller cities, which can be leveraged for various purposes, right? Depending on skill availability and the vision and the maturity to Ashwin's point, and the stage at which the organization is at. And that's going to be important to identify a specific persona to a location and then work to its advantage, right, of that particular persona of that particular location. Also, what's important is a lot of these tier 2 locations or tier 3 locations have very strong service provider presence. Infosys, TCS, Wipros of the world are already established there, and that becomes a good feeder talent pool for GCCs going in and really establishing their presence there. So I think the hub and spoke model and this an extension to the hub and spoke model is also locations across the geography, right? The Indian subcontinent. You think of Bangladesh, Vietnam, Cambodia, even some of the extended locations like Mexico. We're seeing increasing companies having a hub and spoke model where other locations are being set up, reporting back into India, and consolidated reporting happens from the India hub, right? So that's another flavor that we're seeing.
No, great. Wonderful thoughts, Faraz. Very pertinent points there on the hub and spoke model, especially. So my next question is around one of the most important, if not the most important asset that enables enterprises globally to flourish, the GCC ecosystem being no exception, which is human capital or talent. So with the talent war heating up globally, especially in the last couple of years, and companies reeling under the pressure of the great resignation, quiet quitting, multiple job offers, moonlighting, etc. What, in your experience, are the key measures that GCCs in the telecom and networking space are taking to act as a hotbed for acting and for attracting and retaining talent? And especially when it comes to balancing the aspirations and expectations of the new age Gen Z and millennial workforce, what are some of the initiatives that your particular organizations are taking to sort of attract and retain the new age talent? And at the backdrop of the talent war, with this multi-generational diversity that we are seeing in enterprises these days, it would be great if you could elucidate some key examples of specific interventions undertaken at your respective organizations to manage talent per se. So Aswin, if I could request your inputs on this question to begin with.
Yeah, there's definitely been a lot of talk about how to get the right kind of talent, retain them, develop talent, and of course it's been pretty crazy in terms of how the market has been for some time, and I think it's right now settling down. But to me, the underlying point, it's very similar to whatever we were still talking about on customer experience. All that we spoke about in terms of creating the right kind of value proposition for our customers is all that's applicable for our employees as well. So to me, attracting talent and retaining them in this hyper competitive environment that we are in is purely built on what is the value proposition that you're going to provide to employee who joins you. And also, more importantly, how are you going to create the right kind of experience for them every single day? Either they connect through the office or they connect in a hybrid manner from home, right? That becomes the key. And some of the aspects for you to really look at this in terms of talent is, one is you should have a very clear role. And what I mean by that is, when you're in a talent strategy, the first part is, of course, attracting the right kind of talent. We should always look at what is the right talent at that point of time that you need to hire, which is you zero in on a very clear directional skill sets and roles that you are looking out for sustaining over a longer period of time for your organization, and look and focus on those. And that's what we call as targeted hiring, right? Where you look at what is the key requirements that's needed for the organization. And then once you have the stand, so you have two choices when you're looking at emerging technologies. One is, where can I go and attract talent? But the most important component that I've also seen, especially like companies as which we focus, is on transforming our existing talent. How do you constantly have a very clear career path established in terms of what their current roles are and what is the future role that's required, and how you enable them towards equipping themselves for the latest and the greatest? in terms of the technology that we are going towards is also becomes very equally important, because you cannot solve a talent strategy only by hiring talent. It's very, very important for you to retain and develop your talent and show them a career path. So that's another aspect that I would look out for in terms of how you can get the best, retain the best, and also provide a broader kind of a value proposition for anybody who works for you.
Right. Great. Wonderful insight. So, Raghu, I would now request you to address the same question, please.
Following up on what Aswin said, there are two important aspects. One is hiring right, and then retaining the right set of people that we have hired. And that is where at our organization, what we have been focusing highly on is grooming the talent. Now, when we say grooming the talent, Ashwin did mention on a point which said, how do we take them to the latest and greatest technologies that are upcoming, which means we are transforming their skill set, which means there has to be a clear path on cross-skilling, if I have to call it that. So a person, for example, who is an expert in, say, a routing domain, how do we help those engineers to transform into something which is upcoming in that technology? So that becomes a crucial part of keeping the employees interested from a learning standpoint, so that they get to work on cutting edge technologies and they feel invested in what is upcoming. The other aspect of it is, how do we build expertise? Because we would want experts within the technologies which are already present. Not every employee will be working on the next big thing that is coming. So how do we ensure we have a strong learning curriculum, mentoring curriculum, and coaching curriculum for the existing workforce, so that they can build expertise on that technology? The coaching and mentoring aspect of it is more often than not overlooked, but it is a very crucial piece of talent development, because then you get to experience and learn from the best in the industries that are available. The last part of it is hiring. Now, with hiring and targeted hiring, what we often do is we all have a list of preferred colleges that we go to for hiring, because of the past experience, because of maybe we are getting day zero slots, so on and so forth. What we have done here in Cisco for this, and which has given us massive returns, is we have moved away from having a list of colleges where we hire from and made it a open hiring, which is purely skill based. It means at the start of every year, there is an ideathon which runs. And no matter which college you are from, it's a tier 1 college, the IITs, NITs of the world, or colleges in Bangalore, it does not really make a difference. As a student, I register to this ideathon, and if we are able to solve the problem statement that is given, you get an interview and get the job offer. Now, what this does is it also diversifies the access that we have to a limited talent pool.
Right.
Everybody goes to a specific college, we might not get the desired talent pool, and to the point which Ashwin mentioned, we end up hiring incorrect skill set for a job which requires a different skill set, and that expectation mismatch is going to cause dissatisfaction with the engineers and with the people who join in any role. So having that expectation set correctly, so that as an employee, I feel excited to come to office and work towards a common purpose and goal, that becomes very important. So just to summarize these three aspects, right? One, diversifying the way we hire, making it easier for students all over India, especially in India, right? There's so much of diversity. It brings a lot of value. Then how do we ensure that we help our employees in ramping up and cross-skilling towards that upcoming technology, so that we are not left with skill sets that are no longer required and become obsolete? Coaching, mentoring, and having a learning map for the existing workforce to build that expertise. So we would want people who go in breadth, in depth, and also get the right people and attract them towards what each of those companies are offering, thereby not limiting or restricting to tier 1 cities only, which also kind of moves towards the question we had earlier. Why are GCCs slowly moving towards tier 2 and tier 3 cities? Because the level of talent available there is on par with what you would have with a tier 1 city.
Right, right. No, thanks, Raghu. Great points, and especially on the coaching and mentoring piece, and the importance of sort of building out the career trajectory and the growth path for employees, the overall employee value proposition that Aswin mentioned that the companies offer. So that sort of certainly helps in the development as well as retention of talent. Great points. Okay, so my last and final question is not just from a segment perspective in the telecom and networking arena, but also from a Uber GCC perspective as well. So currently, as well as looking ahead, what in your view is the degree of significance in terms of business priorities of building a sustainable and inclusive culture? There is a lot of talk, there is a lot of focus we see on diversity, equity and inclusion across enterprises. And so in your opinion, what is the significance, the importance of this being embedded in the company's culture? And further, it would be wonderful if you could illustrate some key interventions that your enterprise is undertaking at a GCC level to enable and implement this. So Raghu, if I could request you to share your thoughts on this question to start with.
Sure. I think to begin with, I would say our vision statement itself says that we want to empower an inclusive future for all.
Right.
And that signifies that not only for an organization like Cisco, but for any organization, employees or people are at the core of everything. So in order to sustain this, we need to ensure that we take care of the employees. If we take care of the employees in turn will take care of the business, and the business or the customer will in turn take care of the company's growth. So it is very important on how do we have a strong culture which is imbibed in company's vision statement, mission statement, or what we do daily, where the employees find it safe, find it a comfortable place to achieve their aspirations, to grow.
Right.
When employee in an organization comes up and says, I'm able to connect to what we deliver as a company, that means we have a happy employee who would ensure that everything in their capacity is being done towards the growth of the company. Now, how do we ensure that this sustains? And this is something that one of my mentor had told me, and it has stayed with me for more than a decade. The culture of the company is not something which would come from the CEO of the company. Culture of the company comes from the person who has just joined the company, what he or she sees, what do they drive on a daily basis. This is where inclusivity and diversity also comes into picture.
Right.
It is not mandatory that all the employees within your team or your team thinks alike. They come from a same background. It would not be the case. We are in a world where we work in teams which has diversity ranging from coming from different places to continents to different countries with different way of looking at problems. In order to sustain that, culture plays a very important role, because
Absolutely.
we might have differences, but those differences are limited to the problem or to the solution that we are tackling. Those are not personal differences. And this is where leaders within every organization play a very important role, because how you drive and handle these is what gets imbibed into each of the employees as culture. Now, with GCCs going to different locations, some of those locations might not be used to some sort of cultures that comes naturally when you are say in a tier 1 city. There might be a cultural difference too. Now, how do we handle these differences? How do we make it easier for the newer centers that come up? It's like hand-holding a child and making them comfortable with some of the experiences that they will see or encounter for the first time. Newer GCC centers which are at a different location within the country, across the state, does not make much of a difference. But the mature center here plays the role of a coach or a mentor. And how do we take them along in sharing those experiences and predominantly listening to the challenges that they face? Those might be very trivial for us, but it is the first time that they are experiencing. And this is the culture we follow in Cisco too. Whenever there is a new center that comes up, there is a mentor center which handholds them across this journey, and that stays with people. That is what makes the culture of any organization strong, which helps in making it sustainable over a period of time. So it's not a 1 week thing or a quarter thing. It is something that stays with everyone who joins in the organization, no matter what that designation or role is, because all of us now believe we are contributing towards the larger cause, and it is not every person for themselves kind of an environment.
Right. No, no, thanks, Raghu. Great points. And I think that's what earlier, it also, sort of ties in well with what Faraz was alluding to in terms of the hub and spoke model, with how, probably a tier one center can handhold and mentor a tier two, tier three center to get up to pace and sort of get acclimatized and make it easier for them to onboard onto the company's best practices and the culture as well. So great points. Aswin, your thoughts on the same, please.
A lot of very, very critical points that Raghu just called out. So there is a saying, I think this is very close to me because I manage strategy. So they keep coming and telling me culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Yes.
Actually, culture eats everything else for lunch and dinner as well. So what it really means is that you do everything in the company. You have a great strategy. You work out in detail in terms of how you're going to execute.
Right.
If you don't have a culture which is consistent across, where everybody sees the same big picture and everybody sees one single direction where the company is moving towards,
Right.
you may not make that huge a difference that you are aspiring to do as part of whatever you put in your strategy paper or whatever you want to execute, right? So what does this mean is that it's important for every employee in your organization to feel belonged. I think that's the whole underlying point on being inclusive, right? And why it is. Because a lot of times when people talk about diversity or inclusion, I think one important point that's very, very clear for all of us is it's not lowering the bar. Because a lot of times when you talk about diversity, we talk about, hey, you have to be more gender diversity, you get a women candidate, or you have to say, hey, go into these communities higher. It's not that you're lowering the bar, you're actually setting the standards up.
Right.
The reason why I'm saying that is diversity of thoughts is a very, very powerful tool for
Right.
you to go ahead and think about what a customer would look like and maybe address the needs of the future a lot more competently than what others may not be able to if they are not diverse or inclusive. So it's actually a very, very important area to focus. It's not just that it's a tick mark item that you just follow
Right.
and say, I have this much percentage of gender diversity, or I have this much focus that I have. It's something that has to be imbibed. And for that, every employee needs to see the value of why you're doing this. And that's what we try to do in Verizon, where we go back and tell the reason why we want an inclusive workspace and not just say that we need an inclusive workplace or we need a diverse workplace. So it's not a target set. It's about why we need to do this, which will drive a lot more actions which are more impactful. And when we talk about inclusivity, it also shows in minor things that you do. For example, in Verizon offices, we have created offices which are inclusive. It starts from there. It's very easy to hire people, right? You go ahead, maybe look at your talent acquisition partners and say, I need diverse or inclusive talent, and you get them. But what you invariably see is when they come in, they don't feel comfortable in your workspace because they don't have the right kind of facilities for them to be the same. They need support for them to even access certain areas in your office. Then it becomes a very bad kind of an experience, right? So it's just not about some random initiatives. It's about thinking about it holistically across the employee life cycle and making it comfortable before you endeavor and try to do something big. And that's where Verizon has been consistently a diversity champion, and we are also focusing a lot on inclusion because we are trying to do the basics right, so that when we go ahead and look at some initiatives, be it for women where we have something on women in technology or a WARP program that we do, or be it on an inclusive workspace, we try to do the foundation right so that we'll be able to make the right kind of impact, which is also sustainable.
Oh, great. Thanks, Aswin, and great points, Raghu and Aswin, on how how it's not just important, it's not just to check in the box, but it's something that you need to follow up and build through across the company's culture and across the life cycle of the employee as well. So, Faraz, I would request you also to share your thoughts on basically these critical themes of talent, location, diversification, and building a sustainable and inclusive culture.
Absolutely. So I think some very interesting points, a lot to learn from the co-panelists as well. So one of the things I just want to talk about, the first point that was spoken was about attracting and retaining talent. I think the factors that were earlier considered really critical and important, say pay, benefits, wellness, and R&R, flexibility, are all now table stakes, right? You talk about any organization. I mean, we work with multiple organizations. Almost every organization give this high importance, right? And we know, and we talk to talent. Talent will not join an organization which say does not provide these hygiene factors as part of their total EVP, right? And the package. The employers are now differentiated on a couple of things that both Raghu and Aswin spoke about, right? That which is autonomy and ownership on job. What is the job that I'm doing, right? What is my impact on the job that is being provided and offered to me? What is the career development plan for me? Is there a plan that the organization has and is investing in my development, right, and my upskilling? We all know that skills is the new day currency, right? And they know that they can encash that currency later on once they get upskilled, and that's something that the talent today is kind of looking at when they differentiate one organization from the other. The other one is also role models, leaders, and the breadth of experience that they can get, right? A lot of times organizations just work in silos and have employees just work in silos. Having solid rotational policies, mobility policies are going to be very impactful because today talent is talking to each other, right? They're very well networked. They can just reach out on LinkedIn and talk to people in terms of what's the actual working of an organization internally, even before joining an organization, right? And finally, one thing that will differentiate, and this comes out of a lot of deep research we've done, is the young talent today keeps ESG really high on top of their cards, right? In terms of while selecting a particular organization, and then including and an important part of that is inclusion, overall inclusion of the inclusion philosophy of the organization, which ties into the other question that he spoke about is about inclusive culture, right? And I think an organization that does not have an inclusive culture will automatically see a lot of attrition challenges, disengagement, etc., right? Just talking a little bit about culture and summing up culture. What is culture? Culture is very intangible, right? We have vision statements, we have values, etc., but culture, in some sense, is what employees do when the light is turned off them, right? When the manager is not there, when the leadership is not there, how do employees behave, right? There's nothing but behaviors and habits that really are building blocks for this culture, right? And for these to be imbibed, it's very important. And how are these imbibed actually, right? These are imbibed by looking at your leaders, looking at your peers, looking at your managers. How do they operate? How do they react to certain situations? Say, okay, our culture is a risk-taking culture. How have my managers and my leaders shown that risk-taking ability? My culture of an organization is, say, entrepreneurial. How have others shown this in the workspace scenario? I think it's a lot about learning from each other, and that's where I think it's important that especially young talent get to meet leaders, get to interact with managers. It's critical that we have as a good mix of hybrid in-person and virtual interactions, which really set these foundational elements of culture in young talent today. Right? And I think that's one of the things that's perhaps we missed over the past couple of years when we worked in the remote, and that's something that will form the foundations of a sustainable culture.
Great thoughts. Thanks, Faraz. Thanks for those really incisive thoughts. And with that, it is a wrap on this edition of Tech Talks with NASScom Insights. This has truly been an intriguing session with a lot of incisive insights, and I would like to thank Faraz, Aswin, and Raghu for your time and the compelling insights as well. Stay tuned for more insightful discussions happening in the Indian tech industry with NASScom Insights YouTube channel. Please like, share, and subscribe. Till then, it's goodbye from everyone here at NASScom Insights.